that I believe it had a bad reputation
You
before
had one, or the programs did?
the programs did.
Why?
Because all I have ever heard were the kids that were struggling academically and like needed extra help.
And then what happened after you got in?
I completely changed my aspect on things, and it definitely.
But what did it do? I mean, what made it change?
For me, I don't believe I was necessarily struggling in school. I just never had the time and opportunity to really focus on it because I've been working since I was 14 years old. I was 40 hours a week right after school, every day. Not an opportunity to really focus on school. And once I went into like a program like D2, we gave me the opportunity to be able to tailor everything down to the schedule that I was able to work on, and it ultimately helped me be able to get my schoolwork done at my pace without it being just like a cookie cutter program.
Was it a lot faster for you once you got involved in it?
Yes.
Okay. Did you learn anything from it?
Yeah, it was easier for me to understand just the subject of school. That was the question. Because it was able to take it at my own pace versus having to go at a specific pace that school was, or that I guess that the class was going in. So a lot of times I just needed to take a second longer to reread things, and that's all it needed to completely understand it. But I feel like I didn't get that when I was in just regular.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Educational Triage. This is Tony, and we are joined, of course, right over here with the wonderful Philip.
Aloha. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And this week we are looking at the misperceptions of alternative education, and we're going to do a comprehensive overview. We're going to talk about students, faculty, admin, policymakers, the community. And it's interestingly enough, there are so many things that are, I don't know, we're just going to dive into it. But before we do, make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you get everything as soon as it happens. And if you are subscribed on YouTube, you'll get some of the smaller clips as well as they pop up. And don't forget to check down below for the blog, and you will be set.
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about, first of all, what is alternative education in a nutshell?
If you don't know by now, then I can't help you. No.
Alternative education is anything but mainstream education. It is
Pretty
something
much,
that
isn't that
allows
true?
students to, it's something that takes students from where they are and helps them blossom and excel and reach graduation, or even just to develop and find their talents and maybe give them the self-confidence so that they can, many of them sometimes do return to the mainstream classroom to succeed. I had one such student. He went back into the mainstream classroom and graduated with honors, with his honors course. So, yeah. But anyway,
people had asked me, what is alternative? I'd say I'm an alternative ed high school teacher. And they'd say, what is alternative ed? And I'd say, that school that we went to where the bell rang and we went to our lockers and we picked up, whatever else. And we went to the next class and there was lunch period. And a lot of us tried to dodge out one class, maybe two. I don't know. But I go, it's not that. It's nothing like that. And then I go into, well, here's what we do, but it's like, because everyone thinks that's what school is. The bell rings, you go to your locker, you go to your next class, you go to lunch. There's a football game at the end of the week. There's a play in the spring, that sort of thing. It's not that at all.
Well, unfortunately, for many people, unless you have the bells, unless you have that schedule, you do not have a school.
I would imagine that.
There are a lot of people who cannot get that they have these preconceived notions about what it must be and what should be happening, and they should all over the programs.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's where a lot
Yeah.
of the misconceptions come from.
Certainly. Yeah, maybe that's it. Like that old phrase, all of us have been through the first grade, but very few of us are equipped to teach it.
That's very true. Um, and I think we should do an episode on what to look for when interviewing an educator for an alternative program.
Oh, that's a good topic
Do you like
because
that idea?
I do. I like that idea a lot. I
Okay.
have many ideas about that. Thank you.
hmm
Yeah.
Um, so the importance of understanding what these misperceptions are needs to be addressed because, well, the misperceptions need to be addressed because alternative ed is not given any legitimacy among mainstream education. Sure, you're going to find an anomaly. Here and there, you'll find a person who gets it and they understand what it is. But there's still that little inkling. And I've heard
Mm.
people say, I am an ally of alternative ed. And I said, what does that mean? What do you do for alternative ed? They said, well, I get it. And I said, tell me what that means, being an ally and that you get it. What do you get? And they were really not discombobulated. They were more,
I'm an ally.
what's the word? They were upset
Mm,
because I think I cornered them because they don't like to be asked that. And it's like, okay, what do you
yeah.
understand and what don't you understand about alternative ed? And they turned heel and left.
Well, I'll give a little allusion to my blog, but I knew nothing of alt ed before I got hired.
hmm
Much to my surprise. I love it. I mean, you and I both know what it is and how we were able to really innovate, and just the relationships with the kids were much more meaningful. I knew my kids so much better. I knew when to push them, and I knew when to like say, okay, you know, yeah, you can take it easy a little bit, but I need something better the next day, that sort of thing. It was so much better. And I knew nothing of that before I'd gotten there. And I went to grad school, for goodness sake. I taught in a high school, big high school, for my internship, and very reputable. But yeah, it was a big high school. I had no idea.
I don't think anybody really does because at most
Mhm.
universities, as we discovered 2 years ago, you, me, and Christy, we discovered that there really aren't any educational programs for alternative education. The National
Yeah.
Association for Alternative Education, or
Yeah.
National Alternative Education Association, NAEA, they do have on their website a course, but it's more for administrative level. It's not necessarily
Uh,
for
yeah.
training teachers,
Hmm.
which is why you and I did that series last year on what does it take to become an alternative educational teacher. But even that
Yeah.
is in a sense there, it's far more nuanced, I think, than what we were actually able to discuss at that time.
Certainly was. Although looking back, I had quite a, I don't know, forward thinking program. And that was my grad school master's program for teaching. And so they were pretty diverse. But
Right.
there was nothing ever spoken about what alternative ed was. We were all just supposed to go to classrooms and grade and have files and curriculums and lesson plans. And a lesson plan is, yeah, boy, I can start. A lesson plan's like it's like a mission plan. It goes completely away in the first 3 seconds of initiation. It just goes right out the window. You have a plan and it leaves.
hmm
And
Exactly.
so, yeah, that's what happened in All Dead. So I could bring it back. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
With alternative ed, what you need to do is you need to draw a map.
Yeah.
of where you
It
need to
just,
be. But that
yeah.
goes for every single kid.
Yeah.
And then
You
if
need to
you're
just
in a
be very aware.
program, then you and the other people in the program, you work on what that map looks like continuously to make sure. And it's like a river. I
Yeah.
mean, it winds and it bends and sometimes it curves back and it goes around, and it has a
Yeah.
lot. But
It's,
the importance of understanding the misperceptions of alternative ed is to we need to find legitimization, because the truth is that where you had a problem with a student and couldn't get them to do anything, all of a sudden they're working over here. How did you do that?
yeah.
And they might give you something that they did that might have made it more accessible for them. And sometimes mainstream educators, they get their egos all wrapped up and crumpled, and they think that that means that it's easier. It's not easier. I think I told
Mm.
you, one of my students, he was pursuing something that he really wanted to do, and he wanted to do something with the Communist Manifesto. And so we talked about that, and I said, what I want you to do first is let's read. I gave him some sections out of Plato's Republic, and I included the allegory of the cave. I said, read that and then let's talk. So he read it, looked at me, and he said, I'm not getting this. And so we sat down, we talked, and all of a sudden you could see the light bulbs popping off on his head. And I said, okay, now write me a paper about what you understand about that and use citations from the book. So he did that. And then he came back and he said, now, what am I going to do with Marx? And I said, I want you to look at the Communist Manifesto and I want you to apply those same thoughts and compare it to the American Constitution. And I said, I don't want you to go bit by bit on the Constitution. I want you to look at the preamble and then you can look at all the rights and amendments, at the Bill of Rights and the amendments. But just how do they interface and how do they compare? Are there similarities? Are there differences? And he said, okay, so we were also writing a comparative paper, right? And
Ah,
he got
good to
through
know.
it. And he told me just the other day, he said that was the hardest thing he had ever had to do. But he felt
Uh,
so good and so brilliant afterwards because
yeah.
he learned so much. Not
Oh,
only that,
yeah.
but it was like he was climbing a mountain and he conquered it.
Mm.
It's not
Right.
because it was easy. It was because, one, it was an interest that he had, and it was working on that and challenging him, knowing that he had the mental capacity
That's
to
complete
get there.
learning. Yeah. The stakes are, well, first off, you're very interested in the subject, and then the consequence is high, because you're dealing with some pretty heavy duty subjects.
Hmm.
And so you're very focused, and you might get into what's called flow, and you learn really well, and you do things that surprise yourself. And, that's the moment of aha. And those are the most amazing learning moments, the aha moments. Like, oh, whoa, whoa. When you've learned something and it happens if you're in the right environment.
And the thing is that in alternative ed, you have the ability to match the student with the learning style, with the
Mhm.
materials,
And the
and
materials, because a lot of them.
you
Yeah.
can manipulate that in order to meet whatever standard. And so
I wanted to make a qualification.
if you're teaching to the content standards, and this is going to come up because I had an interesting conversation with somebody just the other day. If you're matching with the content standards, then you can, and if you know your SIS,
Mhm.
then you know how to
Yeah.
develop these things. It's not
Right.
rocket science. But I think people tend to get lazy and they don't want they're more into their phones. They're more into what is everybody else doing.
Oh, so
We've had,
you know,
I've
they
had to
want they
work
don't
with
want to be
alternative
telling a story. They
educators
want
who
to hear
could
a
not
story. Yeah.
get it out of their head that they needed to do something better and that this was below them. And so they
Mhm.
refused to work with the kids.
Hey, I wanted to step back on that one last one because I had a lot of kids who would come up with original ideas
Mm-hmm.
that weren't workable. And so one of my roles was to say that isn't a high enough target, or that doesn't go anywhere, or that's not what I'm after. For example, I gave a research paper and I never let them write on the legalization of marijuana, because at that time everyone was writing about it and they all wanted to, oh yeah, everyone should be able to smoke weed. And it's like, first off, you're going to be under the age. I know that. It's probably going to be 28 or 21 and under. It's like alcohol. And I don't even want to hear about changing 4 laws at once. So I wouldn't let them do it. And that was kind of my role, to tell them, yeah, nice try, but let's look someplace else for something else.
Yeah. So let's move on and let's talk about the students and what their misperceptions are
Yeah.
about um, what alternative ed is. And
The
at
kids,
the
you mean the
beginning,
students?
I put a
Yeah.
couple of I put a couple of snippets of students and what they thought of it. And it was a place for kids who it
Yeah.
was for those kids.
It was bad kids.
It was
It
bad
was those
kids.
kids.
It was those
Yeah.
kids.
There were rumors
And
about pregnant students and things like that.
mhm,
I remember. Yeah.
and that's where those kids went.
Yeah.
And so then students, and this was a prevailing theme among everybody that I spoke to. It was those kids. And talk about othering, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Even the
Contempt
most
without prior investigation.
well, I know people who work in alternative ed who are
Yeah.
disgusted by the students who are there. And they feel morally superior to those students.
Oh, that's what he
Obviously,
meant.
those
I said,
people
I
should
said
not
they,
be working there.
I was going
What's
to say
that?
they shouldn't be working there. People in alternative ed are disgusted by the students there. I go, well, they shouldn't be working there. Go
No, they
on.
shouldn't be.
Oh,
They
no.
shouldn't be. But,
No.
they
Mm.
claim the moral high ground because they're doing something for society, because they're going to
Gonna
re
fix these
educate them.
kids. Gonna fix them.
So, okay. So,
Yeah.
the other thing that they felt was that they weren't going to be able to do everything that they needed to be able to do in order to graduate, that they were going to have limited academic opportunities.
Mm. Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
you go into an alternative program and you see it, and it's smaller, it's not this huge thing. And granted, the funding for alternative ed tends to be very low because you have a low student population. So you're not going to
Yeah.
be able to have the publications. You're not going to be able to have the digital arts. You're not going to have this huge range of
No.
electives. You can get
There's a
electives,
trade-off.
right? Because they have smaller class sizes, they have teachers who will work with them. And so they felt that there was an inferior quality to the education. But then they said when they started working, they were so wrong, because they said that
Mm.
basically, some of them said it allowed me to catch up
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I wasn't always there. And so that was the only reason why I had a problem. One of them said, I went in and talked to my counselor, and she told me that I would be nothing more than a McDonald's worker.
Ay, ay,
I
ay.
said, "How old were you?" And he said, 14. Well,
Well,
it just a few
imagine what it would
years,
be.
and just a few
Well,
years after graduation, this kid is running his own business
yeah,
and
no
he's
doubt.
making
I
very good
mean,
money. Huh?
It's almost like a dare. I was just going to say, imagine what it would be for the kid. We've all been through school. And so that's the model that we know. This kid isn't even any kid, say at the age of 14, 15, hasn't even been through it yet.
Right.
And that's the only model they know. So if you put them toward the alternative programs, they have no idea what to expect.
Well, he was working 40 hours a week because he needed to help out his family. And
Yeah,
so
I
there
imagine you're
was,
talking about an alternative ed kid eventually, right?
right, because the thing is
Yeah,
that
right.
many of our kids are looking at survival.
Mhm.
Their
Yeah.
family and their survival come first. I know somebody
Mm.
who's now a high school principal who looked at me at one point and said that they had gotten into an argument with a mother about about their children's attendance.
Mhm.
And the mother said, "I need them at home because I have sick kids." And this
Yeah.
principal said, "I don't care." And the mother sat there and said, "Look, this is the best I can do. I can get them there when I can, but I need my kids at home when I need my kids at
Mhm.
home.
Yeah.
I don't have a husband. I'm the I'm the bread earner." And the principal said, "This is not up for negotiation." And they
And she
said,
said, "You're right. I won."
and I looked at this principal and I said, "I want you to think back on your days of working with the gangs in Chicago and the things that went on there and you being so kind-hearted and working with them as a teacher and dealing with all of their struggles and everything and trying to match those. And here you are tossing all that in the bin, all that experience and
Mhm.
all that
Yes.
prior knowledge and saying, eh, and having this
It is because I said
highfalutin,
so.
what's that?
It is because I said so.
Yeah.
It's
And
like the middle class values. We called it. Are we using our middle class values? We'd say in staff meetings.
well, I
Uh,
just couldn't believe how
mm,
they could flip like that.
yeah.
And the self-awareness is just gone. And they said, "Oh, I think you're right." And I said,
Yeah.
"Well,
The model's
I
broken.
may be, I don't know." But
I mean, well,
I
you kind of
think that
consider the person, not the,
right.
they violated some rule. No, this is a human.
So
Speak with
what
them.
so what the students said was that they came in and all of a sudden they discovered that the teachers were there to help them. It didn't matter where they
Yeah.
were, what they were what they needed. The teachers were there to support them, to
Yeah.
encourage them, to teach them, to shore up their skills so that they could do better.
And to be consistent,
Yes.
at least in our program, that we strove to be very consistent. You know,
Hmm.
there's comfort in that, the kids.
And they said that here's another thing that they said. They said that the program that they were in, what they loved was that it was inclusive. And I said, "Well, what does that mean?"
Mm,
They said, people say, "Well, our program is really inclusive." And then if somebody else walks in, all of a sudden,
yeah.
it's no longer inclusive. It's exclusive because they're excluding that person. And they
Yeah.
said, "No, this program included everybody. They invited more people to come in and share with us. We had people all the time coming in." And,
Yeah, you did. So,
but they were still labeled as those kids by their peers.
yeah.
And because they were not conforming and they
Mm.
wouldn't conform to the traditional values. And they were also seen as the uncontrollables.
Some of our graduates, our most favorite, and the kids who really benefited from our program claimed
Mhm.
they'd claim either one of the high schools as their graduation school. They would not claim at the time the Durham Ed Center or the 21st Century Academy. They'd never do that. So they always say Tigard High or Tualatin High. Yeah.
Well,
So there's some stigma to it, and they knew that.
yeah. Let's move on to faculty.
Mm.
Faculty determined that if they cannot control students and if they're having disciplinary problems, they start
Mhm.
looking for alternative programs or alternative placements to put those
Placements.
students.
Yes. I like the placements.
So,
Yes.
because they aren't looking for ways to work with the student, they're trying to find the means by which they can figure out how to get that student to comply.
Oh, and they're trying to control their classroom.
Well, those are
So,
I'm talking about the administration.
oh, I thought you were talking about teachers. I'm sorry.
Now now some of the teachers,
Yeah, administrators are. Yes, you're
right.
right.
Now some of the teachers, yeah, they want to have lockstep of everything that's going on there. They expect you to do X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z. If you don't make it to class on time, they've locked the door. You have to sit outside until you give them a good reason. That means that kids are
Uh,
missing out on information. That
well, and
means,
kids are also infamous for acting out in a classroom of 26 to 32 others. It's like, hey, I
well,
think I'll just mess with the soup today.
sometimes they do that simply because one, they feel comfortable there. So you should feel good that you have that kind of welcoming atmosphere. Two, it's because they are far behind and they have no idea what's
Yeah.
actually happening.
Yeah, I think that's probably more onto it there. Yeah, there's some serious things going on. It's sort of a scream for help more than a, middle finger to you.
Well, and
Yeah,
this has been confirmed by students. They said, "Yeah, I would
yeah.
act out because I had no idea what was going on and I was trying to figure it out and the teachers wouldn't give me help because I had missed
Mhm.
a day here, a day there, I'd been late, but I had other things going on in my life and I couldn't always be there." So, those are the misconceptions of student behavior, and teachers want kids to learn in one way. And rote learning does not work because you're
Well, they want them to involve
mandating
themselves
how
in
a
every
student is
lesson.
supposed
Yeah,
to work. Huh?
right. Well, they want every student to be involved in every lesson equally. And some lessons were just boring. I remember it well.
Mhm. Mm, I mean, I was told that I had to teach certain things and I'd have to tell the students, "I'm really sorry about this. They said that I have to teach this and I think
Yeah,
it's really
I've done that.
boring." So, let's get done with this as quickly as we can so we can do something
Right.
far more interesting.
I remember growing up with that too. It's just, okay, something had piqued my interest. It's, oh, this is really great. Okay, now we got to move on to something else. And it's like, whoa, that something else is really boring.
Yeah.
So I was on this emotional roller coaster ride of learning.
And then we get into assessments. And students
Yeah.
find assessments as just another way to tell them that they are stupid, they don't know anything, they'll never graduate, and
Yeah.
they have no reason to be there. It's just another big
Yeah.
failure. And these are
In
the things that
alternative ed.
teachers use
Yeah.
as their guides for grading.
I remember, okay, so in Alt Ed, you did this too. The deadlines were for each kid, they weren't for the class.
Right.
So the kid took the test when they were ready to take a certain test, or finish the paper when they finished the paper,
Mhm.
not by the seventh, but when they were ready. We got them to the point where they got over that hill and learned that material and moved on. And so deadlines weren't like ominously over their heads constantly.
No. No,
They,
because
they, yeah,
in the workplace, you get things done when you get things done.
yeah,
The ones who get
you
them done
produce it.
quicker are the ones who are usually rewarded. But we want them
Yeah,
to figure out because, they're still going through, remember, the primal brain, the primal teen, which
absolutely.
which I found was a great book. Um, the brains are jello. It's just like a puppy. It's just like they were after they were born. The cerebral cortex is just jello. And as you said last week or 2 weeks ago, it's like the men don't really mature until 28
Yeah,
mentally.
that's
And,
been said. Yeah.
and the same thing with women. That's why that's why they do so many stupid things. So, but if you're instilling this sense that they are just stupid and failures
Okay.
and that you set them up to fail, let me ask you this.
Oh, yeah.
How many
Oh,
times do teachers in the mainstream classroom set students up to succeed? Isn't that what they
ooh,
should be doing?
very good question. They do their very best to try to help them not fail. But
Exactly.
what do they do to try to get them to succeed? Yeah. I mean, and we're talking in a mainstream school. So in a mainstream school, that's limited by as many students as they have in the classroom.
Hmm.
Eeh. So the more the students, the more limits you have because you can't reach them all. I mean,
Not
26 to 30
completely.
kids is a ton. I mean, you're not, and I'm just loving that Dunbar's number thing. And that says there's probably about 10 kids in your class, maybe 12. And that's a good number. You can have fun with that.
But how much of the information that we actually teach students is actionable? How much of it is something that is really,
Yeah.
really vital to their development and growth?
I try to make it all that way because I try to make it all meaningful. Like,
But
even
is
if it's
that
not
based
meaningful, I'll put in something.
but is
It's,
that based on the need, one, to fill time, and secondly, based on your own experience as a student of knowing what you had to go through and what the canon tells you to do, depending on what class it is?
hmm, I'm not sure. Not sure what the question is, but as a teacher,
Yeah. What are you teaching?
hmm,
Is the material that you're teaching, are the core classes really teaching them a lot, or are they just time
oh,
fillers so that we can keep them there for 6 hours a day? That's
no.
that's that's a rhetorical question. That's something to
Oh,
like
okay.
chew on
Yeah, I understand that.
because we have to move on.
Yeah.
So, administrators.
Yeah,
Administrators are
I
trying to get
don't
rid of
know.
the headaches. They want them out of their way. They don't want to deal with them, as well as many of the parents of these kids, because sometimes when you move
Yeah.
the kids, the parents move as well. I had a parent,
Uh,
I had a parent whose son was coming into our program. There was an issue between groups of students, and we graduated one group of students, and this other kid came in. He said, "Are they going to be here?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Good, I can be here then." The
uh,
father came in, and the father, all the administrators came to me and said, "Watch out for this parent. He's crazy. He's," and they told me all these stories. And I said, "You know what? I'm going to take this parent as they are. You can have whatever you want, but don't sit there and set me up so that I don't want to work with this parent." And the parent came in, and we had a long talk. In fact, he would come in and talk to me because he was so frustrated after that. And when the administrator said, "Why is that parent constantly coming in? I told you they were no good." And I said, "No, he came in so we could have a chat."
mm,
They said, "Oh, he's not threatening you?" I said, "No.
mm,
Why would he threaten me?" They said, "Are you telling me that you are on good terms with that parent?" And I said, "Yeah." And they just looked at me and they said, "Whatever." And they walked out. Well, the parent was really frustrated because every time that they tried to talk to one of the administrators, because he was 15 when his kid was born, and the kid was now 17, so he was just in his
so he's like
early 30s,
32. Yeah.
that he was an idiot
Wow.
and that he wasn't worth the time and that he was too emotional. And he said, "All I want is clarity. I just
Wow.
want to know what's going on." And they won't tell me. And And he said, they almost put me in handcuffs one day because I was saying, what is going on? And they refused to talk to me.
Hmm.
In fact, they tried intimidation. So I think that there is this thing that administration needs to be, I don't know what the word is, like they are the end all. And
Keep the
if you
order.
challenge them, if they believe that you're challenging them by asking
Hmm.
questions and you want to have a conversation with them and you're slightly feeling, I'll use the word emotional, they should probably have a method by which they know how to assess the situation and ease it and bring it back down and not
I
wait
think they'd
for
be
the
people.
SRO or a security to come around and deal with it and throw it out because you don't
Hmm.
get rid of it.
Well, it's pretty hierarchical. I'm the
It's
administrator.
Oh, it's elitist is what it is.
This is what I've said. It's paternalistic. I love that one.
Paternalistic.
I know better. I
Yeah,
know better. Now just behave.
exactly. So they also say that alternative ed is resource intensive because it's taking the money away from all these wonderful other children. And we have to give you some dollars. So,
Uh,
you
okay, there's a
know,
premise there.
so there's a big problem with administration and
Hmm.
funding with resource allocation.
Hmm.
And they look to see whether or not it's cost effective. Well, when you take a look at the DNA funding, the delinquent and neglected youth, the re-engagement funding, when you take a look at the numbers of students who are on all kinds of different programs, if they're in the court system or whatever, you're getting additional funding. Plus, you also get the money for that goes from the special ed department. And many times special ed loves it because it reduces their caseloads, but there are
Hmm.
only so many special ed students that you can take. So, um,
True.
there's they're not looking at it as a real student kind of thing. They're looking at it more as a budgetary concern.
Well, the premise is that it's not a legitimate school system or a
Right,
legitimate school.
because they don't understand the metrics. They don't
Right. So it's taking away
understand.
money from a perfectly good school to fund this thing.
Well, they can't measure the outcomes. They don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And what
No,
they
they
should be
don't.
doing, and this comes to my
Why would they?
conversation that I had,
It's
and that
graduation rate.
was in working with alternative education, the reason why they're going towards the computerized platforms is
Hmm.
because there are fewer and fewer teachers who understand or are able to teach to content standards in more than one subject
No, really.
because they don't have a good liberal arts background. They don't understand the math. They don't understand how English works completely. I would have to say, I have found people who just aren't willing to do that. They don't understand science. I think a lot of it has to do not just with competency, but also with confidence. And teachers, remember, I used to crow about the need for, we want teachers who want to learn. Teachers
Yeah.
should be lifelong learners.
Hmm.
And these people are perfectly comfortable in their own little pigeonhole, and they don't want to make that any bigger. They don't want to spread out for
I
whatever
was
reason.
thinking that as you were saying that because I wasn't confident in many subjects when I first
Hmm.
started teaching. And I learned to be very confident because I had to help, the kids learn at the high school level. Then I started to learn it myself. And then I started to go beyond what was high school level because it's interesting and I like to learn. And it would help me teach. So there you go. Hmm.
Exactly. But I think
Yeah.
I don't know what the reasons are. Some people say, well, teachers have so much on their plate right now. Um, Yeah, well, everybody seems to have a lot on their plate right now too.
Well,
So
that doesn't make
how
it
long
easier.
how long can you use that as an excuse?
It's not an
Okay,
excuse. I think teachers are given too much frivolous stuff and not enough
well,
student
I think
centered, student oriented stuff.
right, and I think teachers need to
Yeah.
focus in on the kids and if people and be careful
Yeah,
what
I
you
think they'd
agree
love it.
to. I just remember an administrator said, "Okay, I need to see this." And I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And they said, "Well, where is it?"
Mhm.
And I said, "I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about." They said, "No,
Yeah.
seriously, we talked about this." And I said, "Oh, you may have talked about it, but it was nothing that was on my radar. I've got more than enough stuff to worry about. That's not important to me."
Uh,
They said, "You didn't do it?" And I said, "No." I said, "When do you need it?" They said, "Today." And I said, "Well, show me what you want." And so they sat down and we did it together. And I said, "There you have it."
yeah.
So there're just too
Excuse
many
me.
things that there's all this minutia that they want. That's the problem.
Yeah,
And
it's hard
teachers
to
have
measure a learner.
teachers have to start to band together and say, enough is enough. That's not part of my job. Okay,
That's
let's
true.
move on. This
Well,
next one should be quick, and
yeah.
it is policymakers.
Well, I know nothing of that,
Well, the
but you do. You know
legislature,
something of that.
the legislature and the policymakers. What's really interesting is that the policymakers that I know at the state, everything is political. It's all about politics and it's all about making points. It's all about
Mm,
DEI. It's all about um they
yeah.
talk equity, but they don't follow equity. I think that they've lost what it is. And these are policymakers who have been teachers, who've been in education. But there is a time when you leave education and you think you're connected, but you're not anymore. You're really not,
Mhm,
because now you're in the politics of the politics,
mhm.
if that makes sense. There's office politics, there's all this other stuff that goes on. And so they need to figure out, and sometimes they're frustrated because politicians other those students as well in the alternative ed community.
Yeah, yeah, imagine they do, don't they?
Hmm. And sometimes they have very well-meaning intentions, but we know what happens with good intentions. They have severe consequences. So they don't really think about and they don't discuss things with the people out in the field who actually know something. I know somebody who became superintendent who has no clue what they're doing. And it was only
Mhm,
the only way I can see it as them getting there, it was a political appointment. I've spoken to other people who work under him
yeah.
in this capacity, and they are just looking for retirement. They've got to get out simply because this person knows very little about what they're talking about. They were never trained, they have never taught.
Well, that's
And yet they're
interesting.
making education policy for a good number of students and teachers in the state. So, yeah. So,
No,
but but is
sad.
do you think alternative ed is politically expeditious?
Phew, no.
Why?
I don't think that because there's a lack of understanding of what it is, it's considered an outside thing. It's not part of the school system. It's there because the school system it kind of needs it. I think
Well,
most
it's in the
people think
law.
that.
It's in the
Yeah.
law.
I mean, I think
Except
most people don't understand that.
I think,
But yeah,
well, they don't understand what the law is. You worked under a
yeah.
director who told me that there was nobody in the Department of Education for
Mhm.
alternative
I,
ed.
rem- I remember that.
And so
Yeah, at that point.
I had to do fast work before our district wasted hundreds and thousands, if not millions of dollars going down the wrong path.
Yeah.
the administrator I was working with, his head was spinning. And when I had to call the district office, their heads were spinning because they couldn't believe what I was coming up with. And I gave them a
Mm,
phone number and I said, talk to this person and they will verify everything that I am emailing you. And I
mm.
emailed them everything. They dropped the whole thing. It was gone. It was no longer an issue, even though they had spent 2 years trying to figure out how they were going to rectify it.
It's something
So
else, isn't it?
it was ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah.
it
And
blows my
this is,
mind that there are people who are in charge of policy who are down there who reach out to the administrators who never once think to contact them and then
mm,
make biased judgments based on ignorance without investigating first. The other thing
faced with
is,
ignorance.
back in the 90s in Oregon, I'm not sure about other states, there was a piece of legislation that was passed and it said that all districts shall provide an alternative education environment for students. That man,
Yeah.
if students wanted or needed, or the parents wanted or needed an alternative environment or an alternative to the mainstream, the districts needed to provide that. Well, there was a
Mm,
huge hue and cry, and all of a sudden, probably within 3 to 6 months, the legislature changed the language from shall to may. Huge difference.
money.
Now, people say there's no power in words. Yes, there is,
Oh,
because that
absolutely.
changed it.
Absolutely.
So
Changed
that's the
everything.
same. That has not been changed.
Hmm.
I'm going to say that was around 1997, 98.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
okay.
man. Okay.
So, what about the community? We're running out of time. How do you think
Uh,
the community perceives alternative ed?
I think they don't either know it exists.
Hmm.
And if they do know it exists, it's again like their kids. It's for the other kids,
It's
it's a
those
last
kids.
resort sort of
Hmm.
thing. It's like, those kids are those dropouts, they go there, you know, just a
I've
lot
had,
of misconception.
but I've had some parents who came to me and said, how do I get my kid in because they need this?
Yeah. Yeah. I've had that.
And so parents see it as a viable resort for their students to learn and gain something because they will find out what the specs are, in a sense,
Mhm.
and they will understand what's going on. But
I'm not sure.
the rest of the community has an elitist viewpoint where any kid that can't make it in the mainstream classroom is less than.
Yeah. I agree. I agree is less than. And I think that perhaps that's one of the reasons that the alternative programs attracted kids who are kind of like first generation ish,
Hmm.
I mean, like a lot of Pacific Island kids, a lot of kids from, Latin America, Mexico, things like that. And they didn't have that kind of that attitude of hierarchy ingrained. And so when they came to these programs, they're going, "Hey, this seems kind of cool." And then they
Hmm.
realized that the community was there and such. So they never had that preconceived sort of it's the last resort place, the place for losers.
Right. Right. Yeah. And they find a family. And so what happens with a lot of
Yeah.
the immigrant families and the other minority families is that once you have one member of the family there, it they all start coming in.
Yeah, that's true too.
And so you're going to be dealing with
Yeah.
and that's wonderful because it
And not
helps build a
necessarily,
family.
yeah. There was a whole family of sisters. They all came to the school. You
Hmm.
know what? There are four of them. And they all went through. It was their school.
So,
Yeah.
okay. So, wrapping up,
Yeah.
The misperceptions are it's those kids.
Yeah.
They're the bad kids. They are the stoners, the druggies, the criminals, that the curriculum is less than. They don't have to do as much work. They don't have to do everything that everybody else has to do.
Right.
And so it's far easier.
Mhm.
So,
Easier, they say that.
and
Yeah.
and this is a common thread, and it's an illegitimate, let's just call it illegitimate.
Oh,
It's
yes, it's not
it's just
easier.
for that group of kids that everybody wants to get rid of anyway, just throw them
Mhm.
there. It's a very nice looking garbage can that they're contained in.
Yeah.
And then,
And they
oh,
painted the
they're
values that it has
graduating,
on the
so
outside of it,
yay,
yeah.
we got rid of them.
We got rid of them, yes, and,
Mhm. So
yeah, it's something.
now
Mm,
what needs to happen is there needs to be a way, and I don't know how. I know that if you look for your state alternative ed organization, they are there. You can go to the NAEA website, the National Alternative Education Association website,
right,
and you can find all kinds of resources. You can find out where you can get hooked up with people in your area, and you can get more information about support.
mm,
But how do we collaborate? Where do we collaborate? And what kind of action can we do in order to work harder on dispelling these myths? I think that is
mm,
something that everybody
mm.
wants to do, but it's a Sisyphean sort of task.
It's gonna take an integral change. It's gonna take a different look at how the whole system works, because the schools that are being built now just continue to be built. Like they always have been. No one's stopped the horse yet, so yeah.
We're building the temples to Apollo, and then once that's dispelled, then they
Yeah,
just sort of sit there. So
good there. Yeah, I like that. Hmm,
so we're going to stop, and we're going to and we're going
yeah.
to close out. So do you have any final words, Philip?
Nope, I haven't done that.
Okay. And I want to thank you.
Right.
Next
That-
week we're going to talk about why we're not actually teaching education in the 21st century. Why are we still wallowing around in the early 19th or 20th century?
Yeah,
Why aren't
I'd say we
we
even gone back.
why hasn't education changed quickly, and why is the innovation not there? So, with that being said,
Hmm.
thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Donnie.
And until next week, you all be good, and we will see you then. Stay well. Bye-bye.